Nehemiah 9 and 10. Well, in Nehemiah 10, we hear about a covenant that was signed by Nehemiah with 21 priests, 17 Levites, and then a host of other leaders of the people. This covenant seems to be a promise to keep Torah, or to go back to the law and to promise that they would follow God's law. And they also added some ideas about mixed marriages, Sabbath, and a temple tax in that covenant. But I'd like to go back to chapter 9 of Nehemiah. And I've noticed this over the years that these last three prophets we've studied, Daniel, Ezra, and Nehemiah, in chapter 9 of each of their books, they have a prayer. Nehemiah is more like a covenant, but it's written like a prayer. And when you compare these chapter 9s together, you seem to have just a beautiful rendition, again, of the Old Testament story, a rehearsal of a lot that we've heard before. But let me summarize these three chapters, Daniel 9, Ezra 9, and Nehemiah 9. For time, I'm not going to give you all the references, but I think you'll recognize the ideas that I've laid out from these three chapters when you compare these prayers of these three great men. First of all, Israel was privileged to serve the lone Creator God. Remember how powerful of an assertion that would have been in this worldview. Among all the gods that are being worshipped, for Nehemiah, this is in Nehemiah 9:6, you are the Creator God, and that's just a theme that is so powerful to the Jewish mind, one that is never lost. Number two, the story of Israel really begins with Abraham. Ever notice again how Adam and Eve seem to be lost people in the story of the Old Testament? Once you get out of Genesis 4, they're mentioned like 2 or 3 times in passing. The story begins of the Old Testament with Abraham. Number three, the requirement upon Abraham was simple loyalty. Again, these are ideas found in these three prayers of Daniel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. You found his heart faithful before you, Nehemiah 9:8, and made a covenant with him to give the land of the Canaanites. Number four, on the other hand, or in addition, this is the way into the covenant. The way to maintain a relationship with Yahweh is exactly the same. Daniel 9:4, O Lord, great and most awesome God, who keeps his covenant and mercy with those who love him. So, and keep his commandments seems to be the same. So the idea, again, is very simple, not complex at all. Again, the issue of which Elohim, here we come back to that theme again, even at the end of our Old Testament. Number five, when God gave laws to Israel, we notice that they are good by comparison to the other laws that the other nations had. This is in Nehemiah 9:13. You came down also in Sinai and spoke with them from heaven and gave them just ordinances and true laws, good statutes and commandments. And that's how Israel would have seen their own laws as compared again to what the other nations had. 6, included in the giving of good laws was God's Spirit. And I say that just because this is in Nehemiah 9:20, that the coming of the Spirit sometimes in the New Testament is seen as the first time, and of course that's not true. That God's Spirit, signifying his presence, his approval, his relationship, personal relationship with the people, that is an Old Testament idea, going all the way back again to our texts here. Number 7, the original problem of the biblical story was unfaithfulness. So here comes the critical moment again of the Old Testament story. It's when they turn their worship to other gods. The Adamic guilt that we often talk about in theological terms is just nowhere in the Old Testament story. Number 8, thus a person could be, think of this now, individually righteous while he was part of a group that was considered corporately at fault. And this is a common theme, and so you'll hear these prayers of Daniel and Ezra, for example. Daniel 9:7, righteousness belongs to you, but to us shame of face as it is this day because of the unfaithfulness which they have committed against you. A righteous man speaking of his unrighteous or unfaithful people. Ezra 9:6, oh my God, I am too ashamed and humiliated to lift up my face to you. That's not because Ezra himself was unrighteous. It was because he was part of a people that was unrighteous. Number 9, thus the exile was deserved or warranted. When they went into exile as a people, this is all part of God's, shall we even say, righteousness. All Israel has transgressed your law, and therefore the curse and the oath written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, has been poured out on us, Daniel 9:11. So the idea of the exile is still part of God's plan, plan in the sense that it was promised all the way back to Deuteronomy chapter 4. And number 10, this is part of what it means for God to be tzaddik. We've used that term. Tzaddik in Hebrew simply means propriety. And one of the ways he is righteous or proper is in sending the people into exile. Another way, though, that that's Daniel 9:14, but in the same breath, really, God is said to be, and this is very key, he's also said to be tzaddik or righteous in bringing the people back from exile. O Lord, according to all your righteousness, I pray, let your anger and your fury be turned away from your city, Jerusalem. So, righteousness of God is not a mathematical term. It doesn't mean sinlessness. It means proper to a promise. He is being proper to this promise to send them into exile, and proper to the promise to bring them out. Number 12, thus the idea of forgiveness has been part of God's character from the beginning. I think we need to see in the Old Testament story, before we ever leave, words like this, Daniel 9:9. To the Lord our God belongs mercy and forgiveness. Nehemiah 9:17. You are God ready to pardon, gracious and merciful. These words are repeated again and again in our story. And again, what I would never want to impress upon someone reading the Old Testament is that we have to wait until the New Testament to see these kind of words. These are very much part of the Old Testament story from the very, very beginning. Number 13, God's restoration and forgiveness of the people would result in a different look for his people. We have called this the remnant. Again, that word just means leftovers. But the idea is what comes out of the exile will not look like what went into the exile. These will be two different looking groups of people, although they're both called Israel. And number 14, the goal of this time period, which we think of Ezra and Nehemiah, not so much Daniel, but in Ezra and Nehemiah, when they're coming back to the land, the goal was to go back to what potentially could be that Jeremiah New Covenant feel, where the people will know Yahweh, and they won't have to wonder, who is this God that we worship? But everyone will know him. Jeremiah 31, verses 31 to 34, what he calls the New Covenant. At the same time, in our last point, this is in Nehemiah 9:36. Here we are servants today, and the land that you gave to your fathers to eat its fruit and its bounty, here we are servants in it. We also want to say, and this becomes the complex mind, the state of mind of the intertestamental period. We're coming out of exile, that's good. We are a remnant, that's good. But we are also slaves in the very land that we have come to find our new covenant. That is a complex way of saying really what we're going to have to unpack throughout the intertestamental period, and especially as we come into the early part of the New Testament.